Hi everybody, welcome back to the Green Malt. I'm Chris, and for me, this is the first time I've recorded a review in about 5 months, so I'm back. Life has a way of throwing up some roadblocks in the old whiskey tasting schedule sometimes, but we're going to get back at it, and oh boy, my cat's back at it as well, so you'll have to excuse me for one moment. Right, there we go. I guess she's as excited as I am to get back into the saddle of things. So like I said, it's been a little while, but looking a little haggard, a little tired maybe today, but who is that going to, who would I be if I let that stop me from talking about whiskey? So I really have a few interesting single malts up my sleeve I wanted to talk about, but before I did that, I really wanted to bang out the rest of these 12-year-old blended whiskeys that I had initially started a four-part review of and then kind of died in the middle of. So by brief recap, we started off the four-part series with Duncan Taylor 12-year-old, a really easy going, easy drinking, 12-year-old blend, great entry level, an approachable whiskey for somebody who's not used to drinking Scotch. Next up, we had Black Bull 12-year-old, which is also bottled by Duncan Taylor, but it's 50% ABV whiskey versus the 40% on the Duncan Taylor 12. It's got more of a sherry age character to it. A little bit more aggressive on the palate, but a little bit more interesting also in its flavor profile, and a slightly higher price point, but still quite reasonably priced. Today, part three, I wanted to talk about the Syndicate 58.6. That's this bottle here. It's also bottled these days by an independent bottler, Douglas Lang, out of Glasgow, Scotland. Though the story of it began back in, funnily enough, 1958, hence the 58 in the name, where 10 oak casks of some, what do they call, rare or special blended whiskey was discovered by the directors of a bonded warehouse in Edinburgh, in the port of Leith in Edinburgh. All right, the cat's going down now because she's busy. So in 1958, they find these 10 bottles. There's 6 of them, so Syndicate 58.6 is what they titled themselves. They quite like it, but they sit on it, let it age for a little while, and then in 1966, when the whiskey hit 12 years of age, they distribute it to some of their friends and business partners, and it was a hit. So on we go to the present day. They've apparently been bottling it ever since. Now, the other little neat hook to this is that according to what I can find on this, they say that they've been using a Solera system with their blend since 1958. So what does that mean? Well, the Solera method is famously used in sherry production and also in the Glenfiddich 15-year-old Solera vat release of their Scotch. Essentially what it means is when you drain off a part of the vat or part of the casks, plural sometimes in the case of sherry, you'll drain off a proportion of it to bottle, and you'll refill it. And so it just sort of cycles through, right? So as you drain off the old, you pour in some new without draining it completely. And in theory, what this does is the very first time you filled that cask, even though you've drained part of it maybe 40 times once a year over 40 years, there should be a very small proportion of that original cask still left in there, right? Because you might be draining off 70% of it and refilling it, but you're never draining 100%. So in theory, there should be a very small percentage of the original blend in every bottle of even the 2018 release of the Syndicate stuff. Beyond that, what do I know about it? Like I said, Douglas Lang release. Don't know much else. In other parts of the world, I think it comes in a pretty little red box with a big story on it. Here in Ontario, it doesn't. It just comes in this bottle without the silly little hat that I put on it, with some really gross looking little stickers that I think covers up some other language that might not be appropriate in Ontario. But beyond that, all we know is it's 12 years old. It's 43% alcohol by volume because it says so on the label. I'm just going to peel that off. And I know it's colored. Like, there's no question about it. It's this really bright orange color in the bottle. So even though it is a Oloroso sherry cask aged whiskey, for at least 1 year they put in Oloroso sherry casks, there's no way that color is anything but caramel coloring. So, c'est la vie. It also comes in at a slightly higher price point, at least in Ontario. I think this bottle was somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 here when I bought it. And I think that was on sale, to be honest with you. So slightly more expensive than the Black Bull and certainly quite a bit more expensive than Duncan Taylor 12. But what's it got for us in the glass? Well, it's also a much thicker feeling, a much more viscous, heavily bodied whiskey than those other two. And that was one of the things that really caught my interest when I first opened the bottle, is that viscosity on the tongue. If you're somebody that enjoys something that's a little bit heavier, a little bit more dense, this one's a little bit oily, just a touch, then this is an interesting blend to try for people like that. And on the nose, it's sherry, right? Like it says it's also sherry aged, and it comes through on the nose. Certainly, you get a little bit of that mushroomy mustiness that I associate with some kinds of sherry aged whiskeys. You get some sweetness as well, big time. Like, oof, yeah, big time sweetness, a sugary sweetness, quite a bit of chocolate as well, a little bit of that nutty note, and orange peel. Orange peel I'll be talking about a lot as I go through this whiskey, because that is a hallmark of it, which is not something I don't remember coming across a ton in other whiskeys, but it really turns up in a large way here. I don't know what the exact content of this blend is, by the way. They say it's 18 single malt whiskeys, single malt Scotch whiskeys, and 4 single grain whiskeys. So I don't know how those interplay without knowing where they come from. So maybe that orange note is a result of one of those grain whiskeys in there. We don't see it as much in the single malt world. Not sure. So like I said, it's got weight, right? It's got depth. Some of that certainly comes off of the sherry casks. Some of it is going to be the result of a spirit that just has that quality. But I also wonder what proportion of that is the caramel coloring. And I know that the amount of caramel coloring they put into this bottle is like infinitesimal, but I still can't help but wonder. In any event, beyond the viscosity of it, the arrival is very sweet. I always get a real depth of chocolate from this whiskey as well, especially when I first opened it. You'll note, of course, that it's quite low in the bottle now. I don't know how well that's turning up on the camera, but I've almost run through this at this point. And it's taken me some months to do that. But when I first opened it, the biggest notes on it were a punchy chocolate and a punchy, nutty flavor, like big sherry notes, right? As it's had time to oxidize a little bit in the bottle, those chocolate notes are sort of taking a little bit of a backseat now. They're still present, they're still there, but now that citrusy, orangey flavor has really come to the fore. And that's why I said I was going to be talking about it a lot, because that is the note that comes across to me now. It wasn't always with this bottle, but that's where it's at right now. And if I left it a little longer, maybe that would recede a little bit and something else would come to the fore. Just the nature of, like I said, that oxidization process in the bottle if you leave it too long anyway. So, like I said, on the arrival, very sweet. That orange peel is there, that chocolate is there, and there's a little bit of that nuttiness as well. The sweetness really rides through the development, by the way, like that sticks around. The chocolate dies off quite quickly. The nuttiness, not long thereafter. The orange peel hangs on a little bit longer, but then it gives way to like a tea leaf note, right? Like if you drank a glass of orange pekoe tea, you would recognize this note for sure. And as it does, as that orange gives way to, like I said, that orange pekoe tea note, you get a little bit of that mustiness. I talked about a little bit of musty, mushroomy note on the nose. That comes through the development. I associate that not just with a mushroomy note, but maybe with that sort of like tobacco leaf, musty tobacco-y notes, that kind of thing that I've talked about in other videos where you kind of smell that or you taste that. And for me, it reminds me of like an old-timey library with the leather-bound books and the fireplace and the cigars, right? Not that I partake in any of those things now, but it's just kind of that mental image that it conjures up. And then as you get through that development and that grand conjuring weird imagery, you get a little bit of a zesty spice on the end. Part of that is kind of like that orange zest, the orange just coming back for like one last little nip on the tongue. But part of it's sort of a peppery, gingery note, a little bit like the thing that just catches you on the back of your tongue and gives you a little bit of a little kick on the end. But beyond that, honestly, the finish is quite short. Once you get to that point in the development, it's going to go like off a cliff a little bit. Just slightly disappointing, but it's certainly not the highlight of the whiskey, the finish. Let's give it one last nip. You know what this is if there was ever a dessert malt for me, I think this is it. Something like a Glenmorangie. Wow, I butchered that name. Glenmorangie Quinta Rubin is something else that I always associate with a really sweet dessert malt for my palate. And this is right there as well. The difference is this is a much denser malt. It's equally as sweet in a slightly different way. And that sweetness will go right through, right? So if you're not in the mood for something like that, it's not like one of those whiskeys that starts sweet and then it dries out and it becomes something entirely different through the development and the finish. This has got the sugar that's going to stay with you, so make sure you want that before you try it. Beyond that, it's a really nice sherry-influenced whiskey. It's very enjoyable. It's not going to challenge you. It's not going to be difficult to drink, certainly. It'll give you just like a hint of zest on the end, just to remind you it's there. But beyond that, there's not a ton of challenge to this whiskey. I put only a bit of about a drop or two of water in this just to open it up a little bit before I started recording, but it doesn't need much more than that. Even at 43%, it's super smooth and easy to drink. And I use the smooth term not in the sense of a complimentary aspect of it. It's just a fact of how it drinks on the palate, because I want to frame this in a way that newcomers to whiskey will understand. If you're looking for a blended whiskey that's not terribly expensive and will be very enjoyable, very rich, but still easy to drink, this is something that might fit the bill. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a higher price point than the previous two whiskeys. It's not going to be quite as easy drinking as the Duncan Taylor 12, if for no other reason than it's a little bit higher in alcohol, but it'll offer you far more in the depth of flavor that you're likely to get on the palate. So if I were to rank it, honestly, I can't even remember at this point what I rated these two. I want to say I gave it something like an 82 and an 84 respectively, or something in that ballpark. And I think I would rank this right around that same point. I might actually prefer the Black Bull slightly from where I am right now, but I really am enjoying punchy whiskeys over the last year or two, like big, bold, in-your-face whiskeys. So that might skew my impression a little bit. But, I think this falls squarely in that 82, 83 point range for me. It's a good, solidly constructed whiskey. Might be a little bit expensive for what it'll deliver for you, but it's an experience, and I don't regret for a second buying a bottle. In fact, I have a second one upstairs just because I enjoyed it so much the first go around. It's not something you see very often here. I wanted a second bottle on hand, so it's not perfect, but it's good. It's darn good. So well worth trying at least once, I think. In any event, that's 3 or 4 down. We've got 1 to go, and that last bottle would be the very well known Johnnie Walker Black Label. And this is my old unopened 1 liter bottle that I think I might crack right now and just knock this bad boy out of the park, because frankly, there's a better than average chance that if you're watching this right now, you've had Johnnie Walker Black Label at least once, probably more often than that. So I won't belabor the point too terribly, but that'll be the next video. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm going to knock out the rest of this Syndicate whiskey and pour myself a little bit of this. I hope you join me for it. Talk to you later.